Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Just going to share my screen. All right. And today's webinar is titled Caring for Self and Caring for Others. This session is part of Prepared Together 2025, the Canadian Red Cross Disaster Preparedness Virtual Learning Series. As Canadians anticipate more complex and challenging emergency events, the Canadian Red Cross is committed to helping individuals and communities prepare for, adapt to, and respond to disaster risks throughout the year. We will be hosting sessions throughout 2025 in both English and French to support your preparation for emergencies all year long. To learn more about the series, I will be dropping our webpage links for you in the chat momentarily. And just a few housekeeping items before we begin. So today's webinar is recorded and will be shared with all registrants. Closed captioning is available in both English and French. Just click the closed captioning button in your Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen. At the end of today's session, we will also have a Q&A period. So please leave your questions in the Q&A box in the control panel. There will be a feedback survey that launches on your browser once you exit today's webinar. We really appreciate your input on how we did today. And if you have any questions about today's programming, please email us at rrr@redcross.ca. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has seen fundamental principles, which we also honor in Canada. These principles align with Indigenous peoples of Canada's 7 sacred teachings. Where I reside on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe peoples, these are also known as the grandfather teachings of wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth. Others, such as the Dene laws, IQ values, or Dakota values, are also similar in their teachings. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to invite our facilitators, Jessica and Kayla, to join us on screen. Welcome, and thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, April. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are located, and welcome to our webinar series on the principles of psychological first aid, caring for self and caring for others. For a little bit of information of what we're going to be talking about today, we intend on giving you a bite-sized version of our hybrid psychological first aid training that blends both Indigenous and Western perspectives on caring for self and caring for others. As a team, we also have other learning sessions that are available to community that address topics like healthy relationships, bullying prevention, lateral violence, and Be Safe programming from a blended Indigenous Western lens. We also offer community action planning that assists in mapping priorities alongside community leadership. So all of this to say is after this webinar, if you're interested, we will have our contact information displayed. If you're interested in learning more about our programs, please email rrr@redcross.ca. We would love to hear from you. So I know that we have limited time together today, but I'd like to get a sense of who is with us on the webinar today. So if you are comfortable, please share your name, please share where you call home or your land and territorial acknowledgement in the chat function. Love to see where we're all coming from today. So while you were doing that in the chat, I just wanted to share a little bit more about what we will be speaking about today to make this space as safe as we possibly can. I know we're in a virtual space today, but when we teach about how to care for self and how to care for others, we tend to speak about topics like depression, like grief, loss, trauma, and suicide. So we understand that while these discussions are important, they are also deeply personal, vulnerable, and sensitive topics that can bring up a lot of complicated emotion. So I'm asking everybody that's joining us today to take a moment, check in with yourself, and ask yourself, am I in a good headspace to hear this conversation today? And if so, who can I reach out to for support later today if I need it? So as you see here, we've attached a few national resource or helplines that are accessible to you via phone call or email or text, whatever is most comfortable for you. Please don't hesitate to use these resources if you need them. April will be dropping these helplines in the chat. And of course, as always, we would like to issue a disclaimer that the content we share with you today is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to take the place of any medical advice or professional treatment. So we encourage you to contact your own qualified professionals or one of the resources shared during this presentation for support. If you need immediate assistance or support, please contact your local EMS or police services. And now, without further ado, I would love to hand this off to Jess to take us through her introduction. Jess, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, April and Kayla. And good morning, everyone, or afternoon. So my name is Jess, or Jessica, I guess, but most people do call me Jess, so that works for me. I'm originally from a itty bitty community on the south coast of Labrador that I call my heart home, where my family lives and I love to visit. But I currently now live in Nistawiau, which means where the three rivers meet, otherwise known as Fort McMurray, which is on Treaty 8 territory in northeastern Alberta. I live here with my partner and my fur baby Nova, who you will see pictured here. And if we receive any Amazon parcels, postcards, or really anything that requires a delivery person in the next hour, you might even get to hear her as we share time together today. So living in the middle of the boreal forest is truly a lot of fun. So I love to get out and enjoy the perks of that. I volunteer in my community as much as I can. I love to be it. And most recently, podcasting has become a hobby of mine. So I've worked and or volunteered with the Red Cross since 2017 in different various capacities supporting psychosocial work within the organization. And I'm currently supporting the National Social Emergency Program as a senior manager. And before I hand it back to Kayla for Nova's adorable, yeah, she knows that Victoria, she knows that. So before I hand it back to Kayla, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and sharing time with us. I know that everyone has yeah, a million things on their to-do list, so I feel really grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with us today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and yeah, really just happy to be here. So back to you, Kayla.
I agree, Nova is adorable. So thank you so much, Jess. So my name is Kayla Tremblay, and I am the program manager for the National Social Emergency Team. And I'm grateful to live, work, and play in Ukdamguk, or the island of Newfoundland. So this island is the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq and the ancestral territory of the Beothuk. Outside of work, I could tell you all about what I do with the Red Cross, but outside of work is fun as well. So I am a partner. I am a mother to a beautiful, spirited baby girl who's 3, which is strange because I feel like I just had her yesterday, who brings so much joy into my life. I'm also a dog mom of 2. So this little guy over here in the pink hat, his name is Winston, and he's a big sweetie pie. And underneath my feet, and if anything happens, you'll be able to hear her because she's 12 weeks old, is my other dog named Lulu, who is also spirited. So, things that I like to do, I love spending less time on screens and more time in the trees. I love nature and absorbing every last morsel of summer, which on this side of the country is a very, very short season. I'm currently learning how to play guitar, so I'm sure you'd be able to hear my family complaining about how awful my Taylor Swift covers are. I don't care. And also relearning how to speak French. I have a 250-day streak on Duolingo. So yes, not to go on, but I appreciate everybody dropping their introductions in the chat. I love seeing where everybody is from and what perspectives you're bringing to this space with us today. So now that you know about myself and Jess a little bit more, I would love to kick off this webinar with a little activity. So the activity is yes, no, I don't know. So we are going to read off 4 statements, and I'll give you about 30 seconds to respond in the chat with a yes, no, I don't know, or for those of you who are millennial or Gen Z identified, Y, N, or IDK. Jess, if you could monitor the chat and let me know where we land as a group with our guesses. So, the first statement that we have here today reads, everyone is traumatized in an emergency or crisis to some extent. So, everybody is traumatized in an emergency or crisis to some extent. Jess, what do we see in the
Okay,
chat?
I'm seeing a few yeses. I see a couple of no's. I'm seeing a couple of I don't knows or IDKs. I see some more yeses. So it kind of feels like a little more yeses and a little less no's right now, and a few I don't know scattered in between.
Okay, thank you so much for the update, and thank you everyone for the participation. So, the answer is no. So, it is possible, right, that everybody can feel an impact of an emergency or a crisis, absolutely. But not everyone will experience the effect of sometimes what we call capital T trauma, right? So, most people who are faced with a crisis or a traumatic event do end up recovering by relying on a combination of their own strengths, the help of others as well. And most can and usually do gradually return to a state of stability and emotional well-being. So, our next statement reads, drum roll, please. You should have a counseling degree to provide support to someone who has experienced stress, loss, crisis, or trauma. Yes, no, I don't know, or IDK.
Seeing a lot of no's come through. A
Oh,
couple like yes, but not necessarily, but maybe. I see a couple of yeses, but primarily no for this one.
amazing. Yeah, and these statements are not necessarily, black and white. There's usually a lot of nuances to it. That's why these questions are a little bit more to get your memory going or to get you an idea of what the context is, right? So, um, the answer to this statement, having a counseling degree, is no. Um, for many reasons, but why we're here today. So, psychological first aid really doesn't involve counseling or therapy or being a standalone mental health intervention. Not about labeling, not about diagnosing or delving into a person's traumatic experiences, right? So, instead, psychological first aid focuses on providing both comfort and practical support for people who are experiencing struggle. It's about establishing that compassionate connection with others and bringing comfort and calmness and support. Yeah, so do not need to have a counseling degree to do that kind of work. So, our next statement reads, do no harm is the basic principle of helping others. Yes, no, I don't know.
I see a lot of yeses come through here. Oh, there's a I don't know, a couple of I don't knows. Yeah, I think yes takes the cake for this one.
Okay, so for those of you in the majority, you are correct. The answer is yes. So do no harm is a really important guiding principle when assisting or helping others. So we, of course, need to treat people with dignity and respect. And this can look like things like respecting themselves as a whole person, respecting themselves and their culture, their ability to make decisions even when faced with a stressful time or a crisis or a loss, right? We also need to be honest and not make promises that we can't keep or fulfill, especially if we are helping somebody. We need to hold space in a very empathetic way and listen and acknowledge people's experiences, right? So, so on and so forth. Do no harm is a really important principle. All right. So, our last statement reads, connectedness is an important element in helping people through crisis or trauma. Yes, no, I don't know. I have a
Okay, I see
feeling, yeah.
lots of yeah, these peeps are on the ball. They yeah, lots of yeses. I see a couple of I don't knows in there, but again, primarily yeses on this side.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. So the answer is yes, and connection can look in many different ways, right? So connecting people with themselves, with their sources of resiliency and strength, connecting people outwards towards safe people, loved ones, connections, community, support, right? Very helpful in grounding somebody as they are moving through stress, loss, or crisis. So, psychological first aid as a principle does focus in the third L, which is link, on connecting individuals to their own needs with others, as well as other resources, information, and self-care strategies. So connection is important and it looks different depending on who you're supporting. All right, everyone. I love this. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you, Jess, for helping me out with the chat. So what is psychological first aid and how can we provide it both to ourselves and to people that we care about and are supporting? So psychological first aid, think about it as bringing your own toolbox or your own basket of resources, whatever it is that you personally have to offer, and using that to support somebody in need. So sometimes it can simply just mean listening and holding space. Other times it might mean bringing a warm meal, providing comfort in a safe or respectful way, or just being there, right? So you don't need to fully understand what somebody is going through. What really matters is that you're willing to be present and have empathy, compassion, and care. Even though you might be new to either the concept of psychological first aid or the language around psychological first aid, I have a hunch, especially through those answers that you gave us today, is that you all do practice some form of psychological first aid in your everyday lives without even knowing it. So you are all already experts at this. So, in order to understand a little bit about how to care for yourself and how to care for others, let's talk about the stress cycle. All of us experience stress in varying degrees and varying capacities. So let's talk about this cycle. So when we learn to recognize our own stress patterns, it not only helps us manage better, but it also puts us in a better position to support others in recognizing theirs, which is really fun. So in this graphic, you can see not all stress is bad. In fact, as much as I don't want to believe it, some stress is necessary, right? So it pushes us to try new things. It pushes us to get out of our comfort zone. It pushes us to speak up when something doesn't feel right. In small, manageable doses, stress can be a motivator. It can be a drive or that push to do something, like I said, out of your comfort zone. So let's talk a little bit about the zones that we have here. You see going from good stress to the exhaustion stage. So the green zone is ideally where we want to be, and often we don't really find ourselves there. But in this zone, stress does come and go, and we have adopted or we've practiced some healthy strategies to be able to deal with stress because, as we all know, stress never goes away. It morphs into its different shapes and forms, but it never really does go away. It's a place of balance, and most of us really aim to stay here, but I know in today's world, a lot of stress, not always possible. The yellow zone is the alarm stage. So this is where, we encounter a stress, something that's out of our norm or something that's unusually stressful. And that's when we're faced with this fight or flight response. So it's when our body, our mind, our spirit, our whole system really mobilizes its resources and jumps into action to protect us from whatever it is that is stressing us out. So we begin thinking about questions like, do I stay and handle this? Can I manage it? Do I need to step away, right? Our body is sounding the alarm, pardon the pun, and mobilizing its resources to deal with the stress in your life and what's happening, right? So moving along to the orange zone, which is the resistance stage. So the stress, this is where what has been happening in the alarm stage continues over time and it just gets more and more and more amplified. So our body and our mind they keep producing these stress hormones. They keep taking this energy, right? To be able to help us push through. But if the stress doesn't ease up or you don't have a break from it or you don't have a reprieve from it, these hormones stay elevated in our bodies. And if they keep staying elevated, it can have a really negative impact on our health. So thinking of things like physical health, mental health, things like that. And then the red zone is what we call the exhaustion stage. And this is where some of us can find ourselves today, right? We've been carrying that stress for far too long. Our bodies, our minds, our spirits just completely depleted. This is where we become most vulnerable in the stress cycle to illness, to things like mental health struggles and challenges, or using unhealthy coping strategies to help deal with the stress. It's not a place where we want to stay, but it's also a signal or an alarm that we need support. So let's talk a little bit more quickly here about these two trajectories that we see on our screen. So the first one here, that's a little bit of a darker shade, is person number one who's responding to stress without coping strategies. So they're going along in their day, good stress, everything's good, and then all of a sudden something stressful and unanticipated happens. Say you're driving on the highway and your tire pops, or something more severe, right? A loss of a relationship, loss of a job. So as we go down the spectrum, person number one is entering that alarm stage. But you notice the difference in between the two trajectories. So the person that doesn't have a break, that doesn't have a fun thing they like to do to keep centered and keep balanced, they eventually go up, up, up all the way, and then boom, the crash, right? So your body is capable of handling stress, but too much stress over time without the ability to regulate and to deal with it will leave you feeling exhausted and depleted. Person number two down here, they have their coping strategies. They like to kayak, they like to binge watch, I don't know, Bridgerton, something like that. They also encounter a very sudden stress. And yes, they do go through the same stages, but as you can see, there is a more stable trajectory as we move our way out of the exhaustion phase. Because again, what goes up must come down, right? Eventually, we will return to that good stress, but it's a lot easier to do it if you have coping strategies. So the key takeaway is that learning how to take care of yourself in times of stress isn't just a nice idea, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? It's essential. And once you understand how stress builds up and affects you, you're going to be so much better equipped to care for yourself and fully show up for the people that you care about. So with that, now that we have an understanding of the stress cycle, I'm going to hand it back over to Jess to talk about the 4L principles. Jess, over to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. So as Kayla mentioned, PFA, psychological first aid really is about how do we bring what we personally have to offer to supporting someone in need. So PFA is built on kind of four guiding principles, and you'll see those here on your screen. So we have look, listen, link, and live. And so what you might also notice is how these principles are connected. So it's circular, there are arrows kind of like in different places. And yeah, they're just really all interconnected. And so the reason for this is because support isn't linear, right? I guess sometimes it could be, I suppose, but most of the time it really isn't. So when we introduce and talk about the 4L model, you will hear us do that in a certain order of look, listen, link, and live. But we also recognize that sometimes it's just not going to happen that way. And we don't have to begin the support that we offer at look and then go through the full model and, and leave at live. Sometimes we can kind of jump in at different parts. So now we're going to take some time to just look at these principles a little more in depth. So first relating to how we care for ourselves, and then later how we apply the same model to supporting others. Oops, back one. There we go. So, oh, I'm going to switch it to the next one. There we go. Look. So as we reflect and really think about what it means to care for ourselves, we're reminded that our minds, our bodies, our souls often show signs that we're struggling and that we need to reach out for support, right? So this kind of brings us to the first L of caring for ourselves, look. So I'd like to ask you, and I invite you to use the chat, to share how stress shows up for you. What are some of those signals for you that you're like, yeah, I feel a little bit stressed? You can use the chat, and while everyone is kind of putting their ideas in there, for me, stress shows up really in my lack of motivation and creativity. So if I'm really struggling with my energy or I'm not looking forward to my spare time that I can spend to bead or create, then yeah, those are some of my warning signs that I need to pay a little closer attention. So I see things like anxiety, losing sleep, not feeling hungry, so loss of appetite, less patient. Yes, absolutely. Loss of sleep and overthinking. And then when you're feeling overwhelmed, no appetite, feeling impatient, heart racing, hair loss, jittery, irritable. Yeah, like really, there are so many different ways that stress shows up for each of us, right? From no motivation to having stomach issues, feeling overwhelmed. So thanks everyone for sharing that. And so I think what this means and what's really highlighted is that stress doesn't show up the same for each of us, right? So if we think back to that green part of the stress cycle, the good stress, that stress that keeps us motivated and on our toes, this ensures, that the things that we need to do, they get done. And that's good for us, as Kayla mentioned. We're not talking about that stress here. What we're really talking about is when that day-to-day stress, so like picking up the kids from school or meeting an important deadline at work or figuring out for the millionth time what we're cooking for supper tonight. What happens when that day-to-day stress turns into cumulative stress, which is the repeated exposure to, physical or emotional challenges, or when that day-to-day stress is paired with a traumatic stress. So that's when we experience an intense distressing event like violence, an accident, a death. Or when that day-to-day stress is paired with secondary stress, which is when we might not be directly impacted by a traumatic event, but we hear stories from, maybe those that we're supporting, and then we become indirectly impacted. So these signs of stress can show up physically as many people alluded to, in the chat through headaches or feeling tired, having no energy. And then for some people it could be having more energy or not being able to sleep, right? So when we neglect ourselves and our self-care, some of us could experience anxiety, obsessive thoughts. We feel just out of control of what's really happening around us. And again, as people kind of noted in the chat, leaves us with no motivation to respond, right? So I always say that a reaction to stress is anything outside of our norm. So me, if you haven't already noticed, I'm a relatively chatty person. Or if you're from back east, I likes to have a yarn. But if I'm quiet or withdrawn, the chances are that I'm experiencing higher than normal levels of stress. So if you're somebody who likes spending time at home and now you're using every excuse to not be at home, that could also be a sign. If you usually get 8 to 9 hours of solid sleep and suddenly you're lucky if you get, 3 to 5 hours of combined sleep, it could also be a sign. So really going back to that idea that we're all going to have different ways that we respond to stress, is just kind of noticing what is outside of our norm. So when we identify or we kind of recognize within ourselves that, yeah, we're going through a really intense situation right now, or we're experiencing some of that cumulative stress and we have lots of things kind of happening at the same time, what comes next? So we have to listen, right? And again, I think that, yeah, our bodies, our minds, our spirits really do a good job at showing us the signs that something isn't right. And I also think that sometimes we do not do a good job at listening to those signs, like truly listening to those signs. And listening to ourselves is about self-assessment, it's about self-awareness. And there are things that we can do to get to know ourselves a little bit better. And it's important that we do that, right? So if we think back to that stress cycle for a second, the colors you see here probably look familiar. So checking in with ourselves really does have to be a priority. Like Kayla said, it's not just a nice idea, it's actually essential, especially if we've noticed some of those signs of stress. So listening to those signs are actually going to be the deciding factor on what that trajectory for us looks like. So you see here, green again is our optimal functioning. So we're really in control of our emotions. We're thriving, steady, calm. We're able to focus. We can communicate effectively with the people around us. Our sleep patterns, appetites are normal, whatever that looks like for us. When we enter, or where we see this in the yellow here, is reflective of that, of the time when we start to notice that something isn't right. So maybe we're experiencing these abnormal reactions or emotions, right? So our performance might have, we've become really inconsistent. We could be experiencing some of those changes in our sleep or eating habits. So again, when I have no longer have interest in like creating, I know that I have to pay close attention because I've probably already entered this alarm stage, also known as the survival stage. It's really when things just don't feel fun anymore and we're just trying to make it through the day. With the proper self-care strategies, though, this stage actually can be mild and we're able to move back into the green. It is possible. However, if self-care is a newer concept for us, or we haven't really been able to set intentional and successful self-care strategies, we do actually fall a bit further into the orange here, which is a reflective of that resistance stage. And here's when all that stuff that showed up in our alarm stage really is magnified. So we might start avoiding people altogether. We could start reaching for substances or food or anything to help us cope and provide a sense of temporary relief or comfort. We could be having difficulties making decisions and kind of experiencing persistent feelings of fear, anger, sadness, or hopelessness. And so, if we are still unable to identify supports, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute, but if we still don't have the self-care strategies in place that we need to bring us back into the green or even the yellow, right, to bring us back just a little bit, we move into this red stage here, which is reflective of that crisis stage we've seen earlier. And this is where we lose function. So we could experience panic attacks, nightmares, intrusive thoughts. We could now have a dependence on substances or food, and we feel really numb and withdrawn from our relationships. So we've had a look for the signs and we've listened to what our bodies and our mind is telling us. So now I'm going to pass it back to Kayla to really talk about the next step and how we reach out and connect when we're feeling some of these things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that breakdown, Jess. And always a good reminder to listen to ourselves as much as we're not maybe good at it. It's a skill we can develop over time for sure. So now we've arrived at the third L of our cycle, which is link. So linking is a key part of psychological first aid, especially when it comes to caring for yourself. So this is the moment where we've looked, we've listened, and we tap into our own inner strengths and protective factors. So, those I'm talking about are the ones that have really helped us through some tough times in the past. Oftentimes, we push through the stressful part or period of our life or season of our life, and we have a tendency not to want to reflect, right, about what got us through. But it's always really helpful to just think, even if for a moment, what are those strategies that I have in my pocket, in my basket, in my toolkit, to really get me back to a better place as I move through this stressful period in my life. So it's when you really activate those inner resources and support networks that you have carved out and then put them into action. So all of this to say, this is well and great, but what does it look like? Depending on what you've listened to, it could be something as simple as, hey, I haven't seen my best friend in months. I want to go grab a coffee with them. I want to sit down. I want to talk about the things that I'm going through. Maybe, plan a fun thing for me to look forward to. It could be leaning a little bit more on your support system. So if something's going on at home and you're having a hard time meeting deadlines, talk to a trusted colleague, get them to help support you if they can. You can talk to your family, you can talk to your elders, your leaders, whoever your people are, whether it is your family, whether it is your friends, the people that show up for you time and time again, really important to reach out to them. Um, Sometimes, and I know this is a hard step for some people, it could be about getting curious and figuring out learning a little bit more about what's going on inside of us. So reaching out to maybe a therapist or a healer or a cultural leader or a practitioner, right? Someone who has the information or the guidance that can help you understand a little bit more about how and why you're feeling this way, especially under times of stress. It can be a scary step, like I said, but having accurate information about what you're going through can really make a lot of difference. So, to summarize, your links are your people, your places, your practices that help you feel supported and grounded. They're your personal network of care. So knowing these connections ahead of time can really make it easier for us to know who to reach out to when we need them the most. So admittedly, Jess and I have done quite a bit of talking, so I would love to bring us to another short activity. So if you could please use the chat, I'm going to ask you two questions and give you a couple of minutes to reflect on your answers. So the first question that I have here is, what are your links, right? What are your supports that you rely on during times of day-to-day stress? Figuring out what to have for dinner. Normally it's craft dinner. Sometimes it's chicken nuggets, but it is stressful trying to choose between the two. What are those tried and true practices and supports that you use to help you through a tough or a normal stress in your life? So in the chat here, I have nature, hiking, me, I just manage. If it's really stressful, my partner's there. Yeah. Family and friends is immediate supports like family. Yeah. Who are those people that you call, for those immediate things? Like something happens and the first person you're going to call or text is that person, right? Um, my garden, girlfriends, cup of tea, going to church, talking to my husband, singing, petting the cat, sewing and beating my grandbabies. Yes, awesome, awesome. So as more are coming in, it's important, of course, to talk in groups about what supports that people do use because not everybody knows what is possible to ground yourself, right? So thank you so much for your responses. We have one last question, and for those of you who answered in the chat, I want you to think about what you just put in the chat while answering this question, which is, what are the supports that you rely on during extreme times of stress? So crisis, loss, grief, trauma, right? What are the supports that you rely on when you are faced with an unanticipated stress? And are they different from your day-to-day coping strategies? So in the chat here, I see getting outside, psychologist, spiritual partner. Jordan said same supports. My husband, my children, counseling, trusting yourself, exercise, EAP, so employee support line, right? Community, family, gratitude, trauma counseling. These are all great suggestions. Yeah. So for some of you, like I saw in the chat, your supports are pretty consistent, right? Some approaches will work for you in times of less stress and times of more stress, and that's wonderful for sure. I think the key takeaway is that sometimes when we're faced with an predictable situation, what works for us in those routine times of stress might not always work for us in those situations of extreme stress. So this is why it is so important to listen, right? Or to be intentional in what your body needs, so that you can understand, of course, that self-care is not really a one-size-fits-all approach. So thank you so much for your suggestions. Feel free to write some of these down if they speak to you, right? Especially when you think about your self-care strategy. All right. And the last L is live, or sometimes love, depending on, how you look at it. And this stage is about what happens once we've made it past the stress, the crisis, or the traumatic event, and we've returned to a more grounded, a more stable place. It doesn't mean that the pain of what happened is gone and that we forget about it and we just move on with our lives. It simply just means that we are back in the present moment. Our body's reaction to stress is returning to a more baseline level, right? So what goes up must come down eventually. So the question of live is, how do we live after what we've experienced? And maybe more importantly, how do we stay grounded and stable moving forward, right? Because as we all know, stressful situations, grief, loss, trauma, they are never a one and done experience. Life will present you with with situations that stress you out, that challenge you and that push your limits. But with the knowledge that we've gained through making it through this event, what can we do differently to weather the next storm when it comes to us? So, is it learning about asking for help before you hit the crisis stage? Is it about moving your body with intention and not feeling guilty about it? Is it about setting boundaries like, hey, boss, I'm not going to respond to my emails past 4 o'clock, and I hope you can respect I need family time, right? Advocating for your own needs and this designation, or weekly appointments or sessions with a counselor or a healer or a leader, right? So, whatever you decide, knowing what fills your cup up is super, super important. And when you understand what helps you stay well, you're in a much better place to help others find their way too. That's why it's set up that we care for ourselves first and then we care for others. All right. So, to sum it up, to recap our learning, let's summarize what we've learned so far. So the first L, which is look, is about looking for signs of stress and becoming familiar with our own tells, right? Or how we behave when we experience stress. The second L, which is listen, is about listening to your body. It's about honoring those feelings you have by asking, what do I need in this moment? What is my body trying to tell me right now? The third L is link, and that's making effort to access your personal network of care or support systems, whatever they look like, to help you cope with the stress that you're experiencing in the moment. Once you've established what you need through listening, you then link yourself to the actions, the activities, or the events to help you recover from the stress that you're experiencing. And then the fourth and final L, which is live or love, is about your journey back to a balanced state where you're feeling well, where you're feeling strong. And it's also about protecting your wellness by making efforts to learn those new strategies to deal with the stress going on in your life. All right, easier said than done, right? Now that we've learned how to relate the four L's to ourselves, I'd love to pass it over to Jess, who will be introducing how we can use the four L's to support others. So, Jess, over to you.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for that recap as well. It's very helpful to kind of see it together. And so now, as Kayla mentioned, we're going to take some time to talk about the same 4L model and apply it to how we care for and support others. So as we go through this next section, I think it really is important to remember that our experience will not be the same as somebody else's experience, and to really remind ourselves that we're not here to make sense of how or why other people are impacted. We're really just here to support. Because sometimes I think it's easy for us to pass judgment, and I don't think we do it in a malice way, like it's really unintentional. But sometimes we might have these thoughts of like, without really considering the why behind an action that we're observing. So sometimes we might think, why is that person reacting this way? Or I can't believe they're making such a big deal out of this, or they've been through way worse before. I don't know why it's different this time. And so I think in order to really understand the why, we have to consider the person's experience, right? Like we carry the weight of ways that we've been impacted by previous events. And most of the time we don't even know it. So most of us have experienced, some kind of traumatic event throughout our lives, and this shows up in different ways for different people. So while we think about how we can support those in distress, we have to first consider where trauma comes from. So you'll see listed here the experience in which trauma can stem from, and it's not a comprehensive list by any means. I think it probably even scratches the surface. But when we have somewhat of an understanding of those underlying causes of the behaviors or actions that we're observing from others, especially those that we really care about, it helps us in providing relevant support. And we can expect that when someone who has previously experienced a tremendous amount of loss, whether that be of loved ones, a job, a relationship, that, maybe when their community is now under an evacuation order due to a wildfire or another natural disaster, that they might go into that fight, flight, or freeze response, right? So, although that they've never experienced that specific event where they've been evacuated before, I mean, maybe they have, but even if they haven't, the feelings that come with the loss are exactly the same. Our body can't really tell a difference. So they're experiencing loss of community, like physically because they're displaced, but could be also, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally because they no longer have access to their circle of support. They're feeling disconnected. They're facing a lot of unknowns, and probably feeling a loss of control of their lives, right? So trauma can stem from different things. And what that means is that we really want to have an idea of what it is that we should be looking for as we support others. So this part is about assessing a situation and making sure that um, people are safe and their basic needs are being met. We're looking for the nonverbal communication. So what's their body language telling us, right? Are they shaking, maybe sweating or pacing? We need to be keeping an eye out for those stress reactions. So how is the current event or crisis making the person feel or act? Maybe they appear to be sad or anxious or angry, or maybe they're alone. The next one is also being aware of what are the indicators of violence and what could they look like? How do they show up? So this could be someone harming themselves or a potential harm to others. And sometimes we forget about the last one, but I think it's really easy to look for or to notice, that aggression or the more fight responses. But it is so important to look for and acknowledge people's protective factors and resilience factors as well. So, what is the person doing that is working well for them, right? What are the things that keep them healthy and balanced? Are they connected to their culture? Do they have a support system? Are they able to reach out for help when they need it, right? So you might have heard this before, but a phrase that I've definitely been hearing more of recently, especially in the emergency management realm, is expected reactions to unexpected events. And so when there is trauma, we can expect reactions to that trauma, right? So we have our fight response where we really want to confront the threat. And this can be, that yelling, that screaming, being more irritable than you've seen them before, or, you notice that they're blaming others. We also have our fight response or our flight response, which says, we want to run away or escape the threat. So we observe someone avoiding or ignoring reality, someone appearing to be restless or unable to focus. And then the next is our freeze response. And this is where we might see people shut down completely to block out the threat. So dissociation could fit here, the inability to kind of see anything through or not being able to make a decision or give a response. And the last, which we don't have listed here, but fawn. And fawning is when we try to appease the threat. So, like aggression can be a reaction to trauma, so can people pleasing or having a lack of boundaries, for example. So, all of these things are kind of expected reactions to these unexpected events. There is no one way to react to trauma, grief, or loss. But when we do observe some of these reactions in the people we're supporting, um, we really want to lean into the listening, which is the next L. So when we're providing support to someone who has been impacted by a crisis or traumatic event, we want them to not only hear us say we're here for you, but we want them to feel it, right? So we can show them we're here, we're listening to what you have to share. And we want to promote calmness because when we meet people in their chaos, we'll both be dysregulated, no feelings are going to be validated, and we'll probably both end up leaving that interaction worse than when we started, right? And listening without judgment too, I think, even if we don't know why, right, someone is feeling or reacting that way or in a different way, it's not ours to figure out. Remember, we're just there to support. And we're allowed to ask the question, like, are you okay? Is there something I can do? We're all in spaces that are responsible for supporting other people. So I'm going to pass it over to Kayla now to walk us through some of the ways that we can respond to someone we're supporting who might be experiencing stress.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. So sometimes it can feel really challenging to support someone who's going through stress or loss because we're afraid of saying you're doing the wrong thing. But here's the relief and the truth that there is no perfect thing to say or do. Supporting somebody isn't about fixing the situation, and it's not about giving the right piece of advice to just turn their perspective around. It's simply about being there, right? So, how do we show up for someone? In many ways, but one of the most powerful ways is through active listening. Active listening can look like giving somebody your full attention, using physical cues like nodding or soft eye contact if that's appropriate in the community, or an open posture. It can also look like offering gentle words of affirmation, like, I hear you, and that sounds really, really hard. Support can also be practical. So ask a person what they need. It might just be help with a task like cooking, cleaning, filling out paperwork, or asking to watch their kiddos so they can take a break. These sorts of moments where they can have some time, that makes a really big difference. And I think the last thing I want to say is that not everybody's going to want help, and that is perfectly okay. Everybody experiences stress and hard times differently. Some people might need space, others might need connection. No right way to process pain, both are valid. But the key thing to remember is that their reaction is a response to their pain, not a reflection of what you can do to help. So please don't take it personally. Okay, and we're just going to go right over to Link. So I hope you found those tips helpful. Link, we've seen this before, when applied to others, is about linking them inwards towards their strength and outwards towards activities, supports, and information, all pretty well the same. With Link, especially with others, something important to keep in mind is what might work for you might not work for somebody else. So, I like being out in nature. Other people may hate the flies, right? So we really need to listen to their needs first and then gently suggest maybe some links that'll align with the needs, right? A helpful tip, if I can offer one, is be aware of the resources in your area. So know what's available locally, whether it's traditional services, community ceremonies, community health services, et cetera, et cetera. You also want to be familiar with national contacts or crisis lines that you can also have in your toolbox or your basket as well, that can offer immediate help. If they're interested, another tip is call together. Call these helplines together to get an idea of what they can expect. So as an example, in our work in Nunavut, often what we'll do with classrooms is we will call Kids Help Phone together on speakerphone, say, hey, this is so-and-so from this class in this community, to get an idea of what they can expect when they call. The more they know about the process, the less anxiety they might feel about using a service in a time of crisis. Most importantly, when it comes to linking for others, don't forget the clinical or interfaith or spiritual supports, because of course, those can be incredibly meaningful for the people that you support. So, as a content warning, here we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy things and like incidences of suicide and abuse. Right now, I want to hold the space and encourage you to do whatever it is you need to do to take care of yourself today. So I'm going to wait a few seconds and allow people time to reflect and decide if they need to step away from the rest of this conversation. If you do, you are always welcome to come back in a few minutes, or you can refer to the recording that's going to be sent out later this week. So 10 seconds. All right, thank you, everyone. So thank you, Juanita. So sometimes when we support people, we can encounter what we call risk behaviors. Risk behaviors can also be known as red flags or warning signs that tell you when something is serious and potentially life-threatening. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more next, but we want to be clear that when you witness a red flag, when you help somebody, it's something that's completely outside of what you're expected to handle as somebody who has knowledge of psychological first aid. So your next step would be calling those appropriate professionals. That could be 911, your local equivalent of 911, a crisis line, a mental health support service, a crisis intervention, whatever trusted emergency service is in your community. So here are some examples of red flags or warning signs or risk behaviors that would indicate to you that you need to speak to professionals. So we have harm to self and harm to others, things like evidence of self-injury, signs of neglect or abuse, inability to care for your basic needs or for the needs of others that you're responsible for, like your children, your parents, severe impairment that could lead to self-injury or harm to others. So if you're helping somebody and there are signs of them being abusive to others or disclosing that they have been, verbal threats of violence, physical aggression, or intimidation, right? These are some of those warning signs. And now I want to address something that's oftentimes really difficult to talk about. If someone shares with you that they are thinking of ending their life or hurting somebody else, you have to talk to a professional. In some areas or in some professions, as a mandated reporter, you have to. There's no choice. Even if they ask you not to, even if you're afraid that they're going to be upset with you, you're not breaking trust. You're acting out of deep care and responsibility. Because in moments like that, someone's life, safety, and future matters more than their reaction to you calling for help. I've been there before. I'm sure some of you on the call have today. I know it's not an easy call to make, but I would much rather risk somebody being upset with me forever, rather than regret not making that call. There we go. Sorry, I saw that the slide came out. So if you need guidance on how to respond, if you've never done that before, here are some ways to do that. First, when someone discloses something to you, you try to remain calm and grounded, easier said than done, but your calmness can feed into the other person to create safety in a vulnerable moment. Next, we can't tell them that we're not going to talk to somebody. We need to set a firm but gentle expectation on what those next steps are. You can say, you know, I care about you. I can't keep this to myself. I need help to get you safe, right? Then you would contact your emergency services. If you are in a workplace or a school, I'm sure that there is a crisis or an emergency protocol or plan. So get familiar with that. Don't leave them alone until help arrives unless you identify that your own personal safety is at risk. So again, don't leave them alone unless it's dangerous for you to stay with them. After, you want to return to self-care, right? So supporting someone through crisis is really intense. So make sure you have that support afterwards. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Jess to finish us off with a returning to self-care activity. Jess, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. Oh, here we go. All right. So, to the final L, and I just want to, yeah, I noticed that we keep losing the Scott in this slide, so sorry about that. I hope you can all see it now. And I just want to recognize that we only have 3 minutes to the hour. We do have just a couple of slides to get through, so we're going to continue on. But if you do have to hop off at the hour, just thank you so much for joining us. So to the final L, and probably my favorite part about the caring for self or caring for others model is because we get to care for others, or when we care for others, I guess, through encouraging them to practice regulation strategies or spend time in safe places with safe people, make choices that feel balanced. We're also reminded to do that for ourselves as well. And so we've done a lot of talking and sharing, and I really appreciate the level of participation, all the things that you've shared with us so far today. So I'm hoping we can ask for your help in another small activity before we move into the final slide. So sometimes I have heard, and I have admittedly said things like, I don't have time for self-care, I can't afford to take care of myself. And I remember having this belief or this preconceived idea that self-care meant, expensive spa visits and traveling to exciting places and extravagant purchases. And as much as I still do think that retail therapy is a thing, I also now know that self-care is about so much more than that. right? It's about doing what I'm able to take care of myself with what I have. And sometimes I might be able to do something that's a little more planned and intentional, like a dinner with a group of friends or a day trip to one of my favorite places. And sometimes my meeting just ran over time and now I only have 2 minutes till the next one. And or I've had a really hard conversation and now I need to go take care of my family. So I've learned that for me, it's those moments when it's really important to have some strategies that work for me when I'm feeling kind of really overwhelmed or experiencing some of that stress. So final little thing here. So as we reflect on strategies that help you regain some balance, we mentioned some of them a little bit earlier of like noticing the signs of stress and who you reach out to for support. I want to ask you, um, if you were given 10 minutes to practice self-care, and we can do this in the chat, what would that look like? So you're in the middle of your day and you only have 10 minutes to do something for you. What does that look like? Deep breathing, yes. Deep breathing is such a practical tool because we have it within ourselves and we can do it anytime. And it kind of just brings us back to the present, right? Meditation, some stretches. Yes, if anyone works in an office, maybe you're sitting lots of times, so stretching is important. I see smudging, going for a walk, breathing, listening to some music, getting some hydration, singing badly and loudly, but just do it like you mean it. And going for a walk, getting some snacks. So I see lots of things, right, in 10 minutes um, to practice that self-care. So the next thing I want to ask, if you were given 1 hour to practice self-care, what would that look like? So you have 1 full hour to just do something for you. What would you do? Some reading, some exercise, get those endorphins flowing, take a walk outside, stare at a tree for 10 minutes. Yeah, kind of going back to that meditation, that present reading, exercising. I see lots of outside stuff and some movement. Awesome. So I know this is sometimes very unlikely, but if you were given a full day, some magical genie appeared and said, you know what? You have a full day to take care of yourself. What would that look like? 1 full day, 24 hours. I see a spa day. Turn off your phone. Yes, get into the water. Get out on the land. Go camping. A rotting day. Absolutely. Be home alone. Visiting someone. Do absolutely nothing. Driving out of town. Do what you love. To travel. And this one is tough because not often are we asked a question or do we have the time to do something for a full day. So these are just some really beautiful examples. And again, thank you so much for sharing the ways that we can take care of ourselves. So yeah, maybe something, somebody shared might have sparked an idea that you think could also work for you. So really important, as Kayla mentioned, maybe you want to jot it down, right? And kind of have it in a break glass case of emergency kind of thing to pull out those strategies. All right, I promise our final our final one here. So just to really sum it up very quickly, caring for others in psychological first aid really does highlight, it's meant to highlight the value of connection and the power that empathy has as we foster resilience and as we foster recovery, right? So we're looking for the signs of stress, listening to what they're sharing, what supports they need, linking them to those supports, and then encouraging them to live with balance while reminding ourselves to do the same. So supporting or caring for others really show us that we're all just people, right? Doing our best. And it really, I think, highlights the importance and the impact of genuine connection and that relevant support can have while we're navigating challenges that life kind of throws our way. So, I know we did go a little over time, so thank you for those of you who are able to hang in with us. And I just want to say we're really grateful for your time and appreciate you joining and participating so much and sharing. And I know that, yeah, we're over time, so if you have to jump off, I just wish you a beautiful rest of your day. And if anyone does want to stay on, have any questions or comments, Kayla and I would be happy to stay on for some time after. Or if you're interested in learning about our program, programming, or you do have a question, but you have to get going to something else, you can always reach out to the email you see on the screen here. And yeah, we'd just love to connect with you. So with that, thank you so much for joining. And yeah, wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.
And I'm just going to throw in the chat one more time if you need to reach us by email and also our web pages to follow for other webinars throughout the year. Thank you so much to Jessica and Kayla for being fantastic facilitators, sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. And we hope to see everyone again very soon.
I
Take
think
care,
that
everyone.
I'm so sorry. I think there is someone that might want to stick around and that have questions. So did whoever
Yeah,
can stay, if we can have that time, April, if that's okay, I'd love to
absolutely.
answer some questions if you want to put them in the chat, maybe. I'll leave it to you.
Okay, I'm seeing Stephanie says I'm going to stay. That's great. And so if anyone has any questions for our duo, feel free to leave them in the chat.
Okay, so I see a question in the chat from Shannon. Hi, Shannon. Would you be able to offer this workshop again with a focus on our community delivered online? Absolutely. There's a couple of nuances and a couple of details we would have to discuss. So if you want to email rrr@redcross.ca, April, if you could drop that in the chat, we'd love to follow up with you on what we could do to co-create maybe something like this. So yes, absolutely.
yeah, awesome. Sounds good, Shannon. Thank you. You too. Have a good day.
Right. Anybody else? Is there a verification for taking this workshop today? So, unfortunately, this is just a bite-sized version. Psychological first aid, outside of its core concepts, is a lot more in depth. But we do offer a certified version that looks a little bit like, first aids certification. So again, if you wanted to email us at rrr@redcross.ca, we'd be able to point you in the right direction and give you some options for what our courses are, Lisa, if that's okay with you. Awesome.
Are the slides going to be provided? So I'm gonna ask April now. I know the recording I think will be available, and the slides I think we can share. I'll ask April if you think that can we do that? Send the slides.
I'm going to loop back with the both of you just to make sure that all of our bases are covered. And Linda, you'll definitely have the recording available to you, and we will get back to you about the slides.
Thank you for your question, Linda. Right. I see we still have a few more people, so feel free to drop your questions.
Yeah.
All right, bye,
Thanks.
Linda.
Have a good day.
All right, seeing no questions coming in here.
Uh, you already got your questions answered from other people's questions, Stephanie. So
We
great.
don't.
Have a
All
great
right.
day, you guys. Take care.
Yeah. Awesome. Take care, everyone.
Okay, we'll end the session now and see everyone soon. Have a great
All
day.
right. Take
Bye,
care, everyone.
everyone.
Oh, what kind of qualification do we need to join entry-level jobs?
I'm not sure I may be talking about with the Red Cross. I'm not sure, but if you do want to email that email to maybe more clarification on your question, we'd be happy to provide any information that we might have available for you from us.
Yeah, if you're interested in volunteering or working for the Red Cross, definitely visit our website and our job postings are there along with volunteer opportunities to join this fantastic
Sweet.
organization. All right, fantastic. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.